The sikha that we'll be learning will be look at the sikha chelik yutes, the third sikha the parsha Teitsei, and the Rebbe talks about the psukim that have to do with marriage. The truth is the parsha is talking about the marriage and divorce, but it starts off with marriage and continues with divorce. And I'll read the psukim first inside, then we'll go to the sikha. The pasuk says like this: Ki yikach ish isho ba'al, if a person will take a woman, marry a woman, and have relations with her, if she won't like her because he found something wrong with her, because of the sefer krisus, so he should write for her a document of cutting off, means a get, the nosan beyodo, and he gives it to her hand and he sends her away from his house. Then the pasuk continues. What happens if she left his house? And she married somebody else. So the Torah says she never could come back to the first husband, because if she marries someone after she got divorced from the first husband, she never could come back. This is the psukim. So the Rebbe says here like this: from deep psukim parsha Seinu, from these psukim in this week's parsha, where the pasuk says ki yikach ish isho bolo, the man will take a woman and have the relations with her, and the pasuk says v'yotzo v'geimen, and she will leave his house, and then v'hoiso, she will be married to somebody else. So the yotza means the get, divorce, and hoiso means the marriage. She will be married to somebody else. From these words of the psukim, lengthen up, Chachamim learned out as a isha niknis bekesef b'shtar b'biyah, that you could acquire a wife when you're makadosh a woman. You could acquire her, give her kedushin with kesef. Kesef means silver, but doesn't mean silver. It means things of value. Give her something that has a value, and we paskin has to have a pruta like the silil, but you could do it with kesef. And you could do it b'shtar, you could do it with a document, and you could do it with biyah. Now, the way we do it is by kesef, is the way we do nowadays. We give a ring, but your ring has a value. And when you give the ring, or when you give, in halacha, you could give anything that has a value of a pruta. And when you give it to her, you say, Hareat Mekudeshesli, you should be Mekudesh, etc., etc. The shtar, how do you marry with a shtar? Take a piece of paper, and you write down on the piece of paper, Harei at Mekudeshesli b'shtar zeh, you should be Mekudesh to me with the shtar. This is another form of being Mekadesh the woman, and she becomes his wife. She becomes an arusa. She's engaged to him, but the engagement of those days is an Eishasish. She becomes a married woman. She's not an Eishasish that she is considered a Nesua, a married woman, and there are differences, but she's still an Eishasish. If she would go with another man, she would be Chayiv Misa, etc., etc. So we learn out from these psukim that you can Mekadesh Isha with Kesef, you can Mekadesh Bishtar, or there be with relations. If you have relations with the woman, L'Shem Kedushin, she becomes a Mekudesh. The Gemara does say that the Chachamim didn't like when the person Mekadesh B'Dia, and Rav would even give Malchus if somebody was Mekadesh Rabbi. But that's not the case to the Sikh. The bottom line is that the Gemara learns out that you can Mekadesh Isha with Kesef, with Shtar, and with Bia. How do we learn it from these Psukim? Kesef learned from Ki Yikach Ish Isha. Kesef we learn out from the passage where it says Ki Yikach Ish Isha. If a man will take a woman, and the Gemara says that the word Ki Yikach means with Kesef, because we compare it to another place where it says the same concept of Kicha. It says by the Avram Avinu bought the field of the Moros Machpelah from Ephraim. It says Kesef Asoda Kach, and you take from me the Kesef Asoda. So there it says Kach, the same word here it says Ki Yikach, and there it says Kesef. So the word Ki Yikach Ishish, it says the word Ki Yikach. We learn out that this could be done through Kesef. From the Baal, from the next word it says, and you had relations with her, we learn out that you could acquire a woman through having relations. The pasuk says here in the marriage, so we see that you could marry her by bia. On shtar, the fact that you could marry her by giving her a document, that from Vayotzav. So that's learned out because the pasuk says here, you give her a get, which is a shtar, a document, Vayotzo, and then she leaves, she goes away. Then the pasuk continues, so what happens if you married somebody else, etc., etc. So the Torah puts the two words together, v'yotzo, v'hoiso, which means to tell you, makish havayosel lezeh, litziyosem lezeh. The Torah is trying to compare that the marriage to this person can be the same way that she got divorced from the previous person, which means, ma yitziyosem is a shtar, just like when she got divorced from the first husband, it came through a shtar. The Torah says clearly it's a shtar because of the sefer krisus. Let me write a document of krisus. So too, when she marries somebody else, it could be done with the document the same way she got divorced. So from here, from this few words, from these two psukim, we learn now that the person could be Mekadesh Isha Kesef Shtar Rabbi. And the Rebbe continues, Afapi, as Anisha can werden mekudeshes durch jeden von die Shlosh Drochen, even though, as we said, a woman could become married, can become a Kuddush to a man with any one of these three ways. So deswegen is no call Yisrael lekadish bekesef yibishor bekesef. Nevertheless, the Rambam says, and other Rishonim also bring, that the meaning is that we're mekadesh with kesef. Kesef means kesef or shove kesef means you could actually give silver, or you could give something that has a value of silver. But with money, you're mekadesh with something, giving her something with a value. And that's the meaning, the way the Rambam brings. Yashleimer ados is masim mit dem was kedusha kesef is der erste kinyan was wird gesagt. And this fits, the Rebbe adds, that when we learn out from the Torah the three ways that you can make Mekadesh Isha, which one of the three ways is first hinted in the Pasuk? Which first? Abgelernt from Pasuk Yikach. Kesef is the first one, because the fact that you can Mekadesh Kesef, we learn out from the words Ki Yikach Ish. Those are the first words. So the Pasuk says Ki Yikach Ish, which is Kesef, Abala, which is Bia, Yotzav Hoysa, then it says which is Shtar. But the first one that's mentioned is Kesef, and that's why the main meaning is Mekadesh Kesef. That's the fact. Then the Rebbe says, since everything in the Torah is exact, so we see that within the union of Kesef is expressed the whole context of what Kedushin is. Noch mehr wie in Kedushin Shtarim Bia, more than in the Kedushin made to Shtarim Bia. Kedel Kaman, as I'll explain later. The Rebbe explains later, Al Pichsidis. First there's this Bia Al Pinigli here. But when he gets to the Bia Al Pichsidis, then we see how the union of marriage has to do with kesef. And the mele, out of the three ways, the meaning is mekadesh b'kesef, and it fits to the way the union of pipnimius of marriage is. Kedel Kamer, like I'll explain. So now the Gemara, the Rebbe goes into Protim here. In Gemara is done noch alimut as a isha niketz b'kesef. He said before that, how do we know from the pasuk that you could mekadesh isha with kesef? From the word ki yikach isha, and the word yikach means kesef. The Gemara has a different place in Gemara has another way of learning it out. From Vayotzo Chinam in Kosef. There the Pasuk talks about Noma Yivriyo. A father is allowed to sell his daughter, Jewish woman, Jewish man could sell his daughter, as long as she's a Ketana, under 12 years old, as an Oma Yivri. He could sell her as a maid, a Jewish maid. And then there are certain ways how she goes out. She goes out, number one, if she becomes a Naira. Number two, if she's there for 6 years. Number three, a Naira, by the way, is 12 years old. So if she becomes 12 years old while she's still there, let's say he sold her, and she was there for 4 years and she became a Naira, she automatically leaves. Or he sold her when she was 6, let's say, or let's say 4, and she worked for 6 years. After 6 years, she leaves. If Yovel comes, she leaves. Then there's another way. The way is you could buy her back. The father sold her. Let's say he sold her for $600, which we assume that she's going to work for 6 years. So $100 a year. If he wants to buy her back, what he has to do, let's say she worked for 4 years and he wants her back, so he gives the difference. This father has to give back to the ordained to the master. He has to give back $200 and he buys it back. So you could buy her back by paying money. But then the pasuk says, there's a way that she could go out without having to pay. The father will not have to pay, and ein kosev, and it's chinam for free. And what is that? So that we say that we said before, that when she becomes a naira, she goes out without having to pay, even if she didn't work all the 6 years. But if she becomes a naira during the 6 years, she goes out free. And the pasuk says, "Yotzo chinam ein kesef." And the Gemara darshan is like this: "Ein kesef lo nazeh, aval yesh kesef lo nachar." It says she goes out from this master, and there is no money given. So she goes out from the master that she works, and you don't have to give any money to the master. And from there we learn out that in this case, she goes out from her master, and you don't have to give any money to the master. But there's another type of master she goes out, and then you do have to give money to the master. What is the other type? When the father is Mekadesh his daughter. When the father is Mekadesh his daughter to a man who's a Ktana. A Ktana cannot be Mekadesh herself. She cannot receive the Kedushin. But the father is able to marry her off. How does the father marry her off to somebody? That the other person gives the father money, and he says, and the father is in the place of the daughter, and he takes the money. So since the pasuk says here that by Noma Ivriyo, she goes out without having to give money to the Odein, like we said, you don't have to pay, is mashmer, the way the Gemara learns, that there's another form of going out of your master, and you do have to pay. And that is when the father marries her off. So she's leaving her master. The father at that point is her master. But then you have to give money. So from here we see that how do you take a wife? In other words, you're Kaddish a woman by giving money to the father. So you have to give money to the master. So from this passage we learn out Ein kesef l'odin said that this master, when she goes out as a Noma Ivriya from this master, there is no money to be given. But yesh kesef l'odin nacha, there's another master that you do have to give money when she leaves that master. Kishayetz, when she goes out, umaniu, that's the father. Now, it's talking about the father being the Kaddish, the daughter, but it's the same thing. When she's an adult, she could take the money herself. But the bottom line is, we see that a woman can become a wife to somebody by him giving money. So we see that there's a way of kesef. The pasuk happens to be talking about giving to the father when she's ktano. But the bottom line, we see you have to give money. So from there, we learn out that a man wants to be mekadesh isha, so you have to give money. So it's another way to learn out that you can be mekadesh b'kesef. Yeah, Shloimer, the Rebbe said we could say, as in the Geder from Kedusha Kesef, Ran Achilut, Zimelen Tasop from Kiyikach, Ishisha, Sheba Pasha, Seinoder, from Yotzachinem in Kesef. Rebbe says, the Chure, it would seem, just different psukim, how you learn it out. So he says, no, there's an afkamina, there's a difference whether we learn out the Kedusha Kesef from Kiyikach, as we said in the beginning of the Sikha, or we learn it out from Ein Kesef Lod and Zev, Yesh Kesef Lod Nacha, from the fact that by Omer Vri, you don't have to give money when she leaves the Odin, that you do give money when she leaves the Odin, when the daughter is married, gets married and lives her father. There's a difference, la halacha, between the two. What's the difference? First, we mag them like this. But when the gay Kedusha Kesef led the Ragachover, when it comes to be Mekadesh issue with Kesef, the Ragachover has a chkira. He says like this. He's thinking, Im ho'ilahu akinyan, ba'deizemes kadeshes, is the source, the cause is the kinyan, that she's kind of the money, and because of that she's Mekudesh. The opposite. That the source is, the first thing is, the cause is the Kedushin, and because of that she gets the money. In other words, like this, when a person gives money to a woman and Mekadesh the woman, like we do, you give the ring or whatever, he's giving Kaddish to woman. Two things happen. She gains money. Now she has something that's value of $100. The ring is worth $100. You gave her, now she obtained. She was kind of money. And she's also mekudesh to the man who gave it to her. So two things happen. Now, what comes first? That means like this. Do we say that first thing is she gets money? You give her money, and she's kind of the money. Now, the Torah says that if you give a woman a present, let's say, of money, in order to be mekadesh her, because she is kind of the money, she becomes mekudesh. So how does it start? It starts from the fact that she's kind of the money, she acquires the money. Like if you give anybody money as a present, you get the money. She also got the money. And that getting the money brought about that she's mekudesh. Or the verkehrt, or the opposite. Maybe it's the opposite. First you give her, when you give her the money, she's not kind. You give her the money, it's kedushin. Now because you mekadesh her by giving her money, the money becomes hers. So it starts off with the kedushin, and then she is kind of the money. So there's a shayla which we it is. When they bring the chachas and beidifanim, the Rebbe quotes that the Ragachover brings proof to both from Gemara to either both ways. In other words, in one Gemara is mashma one way, and one Gemara is mashma the other. Which is it? So one Gemara is mashma like this. The din of Gemara in Gittin. The din is as hoysei medes b'shusarami in the zorkulo korev lo magereshes. If someone talking by a get to divorce a woman, you got to give the get to her. Now there's a din, a special din, that what happens if she's standing in the street and he throws the get and it falls closer to her than to him, bugureshes. That itself makes her divorced. And by Kedushin also. Kedushin, in order to make Kaddish woman, you got to give her the kesef. But what happens if he threw it to her? Let's say he threw it to her in her chotzer. Let's give an example. In her yard, in her house. She's kind of the money because it came into her house. Fine. What happens if he threw it in the street and it became closer to her? So according to this Gemara, just like by a get, if you throw the get closer to her, and she becomes Megurish, the same thing by Kedushin. Well, the Shitas are Rishayim is the Din Azayayim and the Gates of Kesef Kedushin. And the many Shita of Rishayim, it's not only if he throws her a star for Kedushin. Same thing if he throws her money for Kedushin. He throws her the money and says, Ariat Mekudeshes, leave with this money, and it doesn't come into her hand, doesn't come into her chotzer, but it comes closer to her than to him. And the dinish is mekudesh. Now this is a special din that's by Kedushin and by Kedushin. Stamazay by money, it doesn't work. Stamazay by money, if you throw money, gives someone the present money, and you throw money into his hand, he's kainet. You throw it into his yard, into his house, he's kainet. It becomes his. But if you throw it in the street and it falls closer to the second guy than to the one that is thrown to, closer than the one that threw it, the person who it fell closer to is not kainet the money. This is not a din by kinyonim. This is a din specifically by Gerish and Magdush. So the Rebbe says, it's like a Shabbat says this. Since the money, she's not kaina. Like I just said, you cannot be kaina money by the money falling closer to you than to the other person. We're not talking here that if money fell within her dal damas, because there's another din, and that's a din nothing to do with Gerish and Regdush. That's a din by money. That if you put money in somebody's dal damas, someone is standing, and there's dal damas around it, 4 damas, and you put money within the dal damas in order to give it to the person is kaina. That's a din by money. We're not talking here about you threw the kedushin within her dal damas. It wasn't within the dal damas, but it was closer to her than to him. And by money, by the kinyan of money, you're not kaina the money if it fell closer to you. So the question is, how should become a kudish? You have to be kaina money, the kesef, in order to become a kudish. Since there's no din of being kaina the money when it comes closer to you, so she's not kaina the money. If she's not kaina the money, there should be no kedushin. Is a fun araya, so we have a raya as a hi'ilahi kedushin v'adizei kaina dover. A raya that works the other way. She becomes mekudesh not because she's kaina the money. It's the opposite. First, she becomes mekudesh and then she's kaina the money. She's kaina them kesed or then was mekudesh. She's kaina the money because she becomes mekudesh. Now, legabe kedushin, there is a din of being close to her. Legabe kinyonim not. But if it starts with kedushin, there's no problem. The moment you mekadesh a woman with kesed, she becomes mekudesh, and because she's mekudesh, she's kaina the money. So therefore, when the money fell close to her, by kedushin, there's a din that works. So she's kaina, so she becomes mekudesh. And anytime you give a woman money for kedushin, she's kaina the money afterwards. So she's kaina the money. But if we would say that works the other way, the first she's kaina the money, and because she's kaina the money, she's mekudesh, this wouldn't work because she's not kaina the money. You threw the money court of law. Court of law is not enough to make it mekudesh, to make the kinyan. I mean, so she's not kaina the money. She's not kaina the money. She can be mekudesh. But if you learn the other way, it makes sense that first she's mekudesh, and because she's mekudesh through the money, she's kaina. So you threw it in the way which taka she couldn't be kaina the money, but she's not kaina. You make her mekudesh, and the din is if she's mekudesh with the money, she's kaina the money. So that's a raya that starts with kedushin, and because she becomes mekudesh, that's why she's kaina. Leida bringt the raya zum ersten Mal. Also he brings another raya to the other way that it starts over the kinyan. First you're kaina the money, and then she becomes mekudesh. Where do we see that? The Gemara zogt as by kedushin is teiche the diber lafke diber domen. We know a din in the Kol HaTorah Kula that teiche the diber kedibur, which means that something that you do, and if you regret, you change your mind within the small span of time called teiche the diber, which is a few seconds. Teiche the diber means as long as it takes to say Sholem Alecha Rabbi or Sholem Alecha Rabbi made it. How long does it take that? But as long as the time span did not pass, you could change. Give me a simple example that everyone knows. Instead of saying Mitzvah, you have to say, instead of Akel HaKodesh, you say Amelech HaKodesh. What happens if a person forgot and he said Akel HaKodesh, but within a second he changed and he said Amelech HaKodesh? Yes. So it's okay. Why? Because it's within Teiche the Dibur, you could still change. And the din is by everything. Someone gives someone a present. You could change your mind within, after you give it to him, within 3 seconds or whatever amount it takes to say, you could change your mind and then it's work. But there's an exception. By Kedushin, it doesn't work. If a person gives a woman Kedushin, she becomes a Kudish, even if within Teiche the Dibur he changes his mind. You can't change your mind from the Kedushin, even if it's within the span of time Teiche the Dibur. He's Mefarish the Rashbam. The Rashbam gives an example. For instance, what's the case? In front of Eidim, you gave Kedushin to a woman. And within this amount of time, these few seconds, he said, let it be a present and not Kedushin. So he changed his mind from the Kedushin. Ain't shameless, we don't listen to him. Mekudeshes, it's Mekudesh, not 100%, but there's some level of Kedushin that happens here, even though he changed his mind. And normally, if he changed his mind, it should be a bottle. If I give a present to somebody, I change their mind from the present, A present is not a present. And here it's not like that. But the example that the Rashbam gave of changing your mind by Kedushin, Dibur, he says a strange thing. If he changes, first he gave it to Hashem Kedushin, and within Dibur, he changed his mind. He said, no, let it be a present and not Kedushin. So let's think. Why did the Rashbam have to give this example? Why did he have to say, let it be a present? Normally, what would you say? The example of this case would be very simple. He gave her Kedushin, and within Dibur, Hashem said, no, I don't want to be Kedushin. And give me back the money. Why did the Rashbam say, he's saying, I want you still to keep the money. It should be a matone, but not kedushin. And that's the chiddush that Techedim doesn't help. Why didn't he give a simple example? It's not verstandig, it's not understood. Why did the Rashbam give the case as a zok lehev matone v'lehev kedushin? And what shot he changed his mind? It should be a matone. It should remain a present and not kedushin. Why doesn't he say simple? As er is in ganzen chayze for the sinas hakesed. He gave a kedushin Kesef for Kedushin, and he changed his mind. The geld for the Rishon. He says, give me back the money. Within Terkeh, but that would be an example of changing your mind. Why didn't the Rashbam say that? The Chorah says, this is the proof. I said, that had he not said, let it stay matona, he would say, just I don't want it to be Kedushin, give me back the money. Hitaka could change his mind even by Kedushin. For Mayeh says, since normally you could change your mind by other things, not by Kedushin, by other things. So anytime you give someone money and you change your mind within Dibur, it's changed, and he has to give you back the money. So here also, since the kinyan of money, you could change your mind Dibur. So here, let's say if he would say to her, he gave her Kedushin, and he says to her in a second, within Dibur, no, I want the money back. It's not Kedushin. So why shouldn't that work? Because we said from kinyan of money, you could change your mind. And all he's doing is changing his mind from the kinyan. I gave you money, I want my money back. And B'mela shouldn't be Mekudesh. From giving money, you could change your mind. So he could change his mind. So why shouldn't he be able to change his mind? Even though there's a din like Dushin, you can't change your mind. But he's not changing your mind from the Dushin, he's changing your mind from the money. And that you could change your mind. And the Taka would be able to. But that's only if you hold that it starts with Kinyan. The Kedushin comes after Kinyan. And since Kinyan of money, by money itself, you could change your mind. So B'mela, he should be able to change his mind from the money and take the money back. And B'mela, there will be no Kedushin because Kedushin comes as change. Is niet von only when he changes his mind, not from the money, nor blaze from the Kedushin. He said, I don't want it to be Kedushin, but the money should still stay yours. When in the Bailis from them Kesef macht nicht Kishin, in who owns the money didn't change. As a Shalish als Matone, he's still leaving it as a Matone. Is the din, then we say Azein Shemelei. Like we don't listen to him, you can't do it. While from Kedushin, but from Kedushin you can't change. So that's the raya that it starts off with Kinyan. That's why the Rashbam, the only way he could say that you can't change your mind, is if he says, I'm changing my mind only from the Kedushin. But if he says, I'm changing my mind from the Kinyan, that you could do, because you could change your mind. This is Kedushin. The Kedushin only comes as a result of the Kinyan. And from the Kinyan, you change your mind. So automatically there is no Kedushin. For them is Arayas. This proves as a Elohu Kinyan that the cause, the first thing starts off as a Kinyan. But Leib as a Elohu Kedushin, if the beginning is the Kedushin. First you give it to her and it's Kedushin. Because you're Mekadosh, that's why she becomes, the money gets hers. If that would be the case, you could say Pshat in the Gemara, not like the Rashbam. Simple. As a Vilcharoto, he wants to change his mind for the money. And for that, we still don't listen to him. Since she only gets the money because of the Kedushin, and from Kedushin you can't change your mind. He can't change his mind from giving her the money because he can't change the mind from the Kedushin. The Kedushin is Chalvamesh has the money. Was kommt als the Tzov from the Kedushin. So, which comes to the Tzov from the Kedushin. So therefore, the Rashbam had the din be, had the inyan be, that it starts off with the Kinyan, then had it been the opposite, if it starts off on the Kedushin, so then the Rashbam could have said stam. If he comes and says, I don't want the Kedushin to be Kedushin, doesn't give him a ton, I don't want him a ton, it's not a ton, I don't want the Kedushin to be Kedushin, maybe there is no Kedushin, because you can't change from Kedushin But only if you learn that it starts off with the Kenyan, the Kedushin start, because first you make her get the money. From that, if it starts off with the money, you could have charata. Like any time you give someone money, you could have charata. So why shouldn't you be able to have charata? The father of the Rashbam learned, that's what the Rashbam has to learn. What does the Gemara mean? That he didn't change his mind from giving her the money. He doesn't mind that she keeps the money. The money should be a matone. Und sein Mashane sein Kesef Gedushin. If Kesef Matone is nicht kein Chazor in Beilas ala Kesef. He changed his mind. Before he said it's giving her the money as a for Gedushin. Now he's giving her as a Matone. Good. That doesn't change the Beilas. Who owns the money? He wants her to keep the money. He gave her the money. He wants to keep it. He just changed the Gedushin part of it. You're blazed from the Gedushin. When the Kesef Lev Matone, the money is still Matone. So from the fact that Rashbam felt it to say that when he changed his mind, and he can't change his mind, take the dibur, is only if he lets her have the money still matone, is a raya that it starts off with kinyan. And because it starts off with kinyan, had he not said you should keep the money, he could have charata. Because it starts with kinyan. So the first thing he says, the kinyan I gave you, I want it back. And by kinyan money, you could take back. And you could take back within the dibur. And automatically, there would be no kedushin. Why do you have to give an example that he said, I want the money should be a matone? Because the money matonim is a case where he didn't change his mind from the money, just change his mind from the kedushin, and then he can't have charota because you can't change his mind from kedushin to kedushin. So the bottom line is we have these two ways to learn. One way is to learn that the kinyan kesef starts off that you're giving her kedushin, and because you're in kaddish with the kesef, that's why she is kind of the money. Or you could do the opposite. You give her money to be kained. Since you had a mind for kedushin, that kinyan that she's kind of the money, that makes the kedushin. Now the Rebbe is going to say, "V'yashleimar," you could say, "As dose the chilitz zwischen the zwei lemudim von wann wir lernen Tarus Kesef Kedushin, tiefen kiyikach oder für Yotzachinen in Kesef." Now this could explain these two ways will be dependent on from which pasuk we learn out the din that you can mekadesh bekesef, whether it's from the pasuk kiyikach or the pasuk Yotzachinen in Kesef, in Kesef lod nezeh, yesh Kesef lod nach. But before I go further, I have to give a certain introduction because it's written very shortly and I want to explain it. We said before there are two things that happen by this giving kesef. She owns the money. He gave her the money. She now is kind of the money, and she becomes mekudesh. The whole discussion is which of the one is the first and brings the second. Is the kedushin brings the kinyan and the kinyan brings the kedushin. The difference between the kinyan and the kedushin is the kinyan is something that has to do with her. If you say it starts off with kinyan, it starts off with her because the kinyan, she is kind of the money. So when we speak about kinyan, so we're saying if it starts up with kinyan means when she gets the money and she is kind of the money, then she becomes mekudesh. So where does this whole process of kedushin start? It starts from her, because in the husband's side, when he gives it, she's not kind yet. It's only when she gets it, that point she's kind. And if we're going to learn that it starts with kinyan, that means it starts from her. She is kind, and after she is kind, now is the kedushin happens. But if you're going to say that starts with kedushin, it's his giving, not her being kainah. It's his giving. It's the husband's side. His giving. When he gives the kedushin, she becomes mekudesh, and b'meila now she's kainah the kesef. So again, the difference between the two is that if you say it starts with kinyan, it starts from her side, because kinyan is the kinyan that you're kainah. She is kainah. If it starts with kedushin, it starts from his side. That when he gives the kedushin, that makes her mekudesh, but it's his giving the kedushin. It's nothing to do with her being kinyan the money. It's his giving kedushin. The kinyan comes later. Now, based on that, we'll see the difference between the two psukim. In posik yikach ishisho, in the posik that we learned, the first posik that we learned out kesef kedushin from the word ki yikach ishisho, is the agosh of the pulos eish. The posik is talking about the man's side, when a man will take a woman. But the other posik, which tells you that you have to give kesef, talks about the father of the girl, which means the recipient, which is the woman. So the posik yikach talking about the man's side. The posik ein keselod the yesh keselod nacher is the adgosh of them was their odin their avos. That posik talks about do you get kesef or not? So one posik talks about you giving the kesef. Yikach is he takes her, which means talking about the man's part. And the posik, the other part where we learn out that you have to give money for kedushin, is that there is a odin a master that she's leaving that has to receive money. And the master is in her place. So we're talking about the woman's side. And the Riber, if you learn that Kedusha Kesef from the Posik, Kiyikach Ishisha, is mit Saber zu sagen, makes sense, as the Kedushin tut sich gut durch the Pulas and Sinnes Kesef from the Baal. If it talks about the man, so it's talking about the man giving the money. But the man giving the money is not the Kenyan. That's Kiyikach Ish, that's what the man does. And those the Kedushin peilt at the Ishas Volkenis and Kesef. His giving makes that she's Kena. So since the Posik talks about marrying through kesef and stresses the man does it, is mashma, it's not the Kenyan, it's the Kedushin. He gives it as Kedushin, and then she is kind of the money. But if you look at the other pasuk where it talks about the odin that she's leaving, the man who's leaving, which means father of the girl, which is the girl's side, is mistaber, makes sense. I didn't see this kesef from the Baal is not genug as is over mekudesh. Mashma that it's not the husband's giving that makes her mekudesh. Und die Gedushen tut sich auf der durch dem, was yesh kesef beilas ala kesef, the isha is keine bakum den kesef. That's when the woman, because the pasuk talks about the makabel of the kesef, the receiver of the kesef, the father, which is the same thing as the woman herself. So we're talking about the receiver. So if the pasuk expresses the receiver, that means the pasuk expresses the Kenyan, because the Kenyan starts with the receiver, not with the man. So that's the difference. So if you learn from Kiyik Hashisho, it fits to this way that we learn that it goes on the man and the Ikir is the Kedushin, and then from the Kedushin, she's kind of the Kesef. If you learn from the Pasuk, Yesh Kesef, Yatzichinim and Kesef, Yesh Kesef, Lod and Achar. So there it talks about the receiver of the money, which is the woman, or in that case, it's the father of the girl, which is like the woman, like the girl herself. So we're talking about that the Kedushin has to do with the receiver. That means it has to do with the Kenyan, because the Kenyan is something that is, she is kind of. So we see, just like we said, there are two Gemaras where we find one is mashma like this. Same thing in this Gemara where we have two different ways of learning out the din kesef. One is mashma fits to that the Kenyan starts and then goes to the Dush, and the other one is that it starts with Dush and then it goes to the Kenyan. Now this is the Nigla part. Everything in Nigla comes as a evolvement of the way the Inyonim are b'pnimis hatayr. So B'meila, this whole thing of marriage, we have in Pnimis HaTorah. There's a ruchnis the communion of marriage. And all the details we find in marriage, and the details we're discussing here is which one comes first, the Kinyan or the Kedushin, also will have to be in the ruchnis the Kinyan. Now, what is Bechlal the ruchnis the Kinyan of marriage? It says Yudua, the Rebbe says it's known, there is a movement in Yonayna that it comes from ruchnis. So Yudua, it's known, the Pirish Afnimi, when the Isha Niknes Baila, we know the deeper meaning in a woman is acquired by her husband, to her husband. Really what it means is there's a marriage between the Eibishter and the Yidden. And this marriage of the Eibishter with Yidden is also connected to these three things. Now the Rebbe doesn't say, just Torah 28, he says, look at the Torah, Kesef Shemtev. So there it says, like what's Bruchni is Kesef Shtarabiyah. So he says it's Torah, Aveidun, Gemilas Chasodim. Kesef is Gemilas Chasodim. Kesef, you give money. That's when you do Gemilas Chasodim. That's how you connect yourself to the Eibishter. Gemilas Chasodim. Shtar, that's Torah. Torah, the ACS are Torah. That's like a document. And Bia, that's when Bia is Aveda, which is Aveda Satfila, Karbonis, and Aveda Satfila. That's Bia when you unite, become one with the Eibishter. So these are the three things, Beruchni. But the Rebbe doesn't go into it here because that's not the point of the Sikha. The point of the Sikha is to say that the marriage of a woman to a man is the marriage of the Yidden to David, Knesset to David. Or Kshem in the Gedushin Lamata Beinish Lish and the Dodi Tzvei Inyonim. And just like when there's a marriage down here, there's two Inyonim. Das was Isha Knui Labailo and das was his Neser Alachedim. When a woman gets married, what happens? Two things happen. Number one, she now belongs to her husband. Number two, she's forbidden to anybody else. There's the positive part, the negative. The yes, that she's now his. And then you have the negative part that she's also, she's forbidden to any other man. The same two things you have in the marriage of a Yid with Eibishter. Number one, you have the dveikus for Yid with Eibishter, that we connect to the, like the woman now, she is connected to this man, she's shaykh to this man. So we are dovuk, we connected to the Eibishter. And then you have the other thing by the woman, that she's also to everybody else, means that the Yid is married to the Eibishter means that he has to stay away from other things other than the Eibishter, things which are concealment of the Eibishter. For Ninyon HaElam, from weltliche worldly matters. You have to be separated wholly from the worldly tivus. Just like a woman has to be separated from everything else besides her husband, the Yid has to be separated from everything else besides the Eibishter. So number one, the positive, you have to be connected with the Eibishter, and also you have to be separated from everything else. Just like down here, these two inyonim, that she is shayach to the man, the husband, and she is not shayach to anybody else. So the two go together. You can't separate. Say, well, I only have one of the two things. You have to have both. Same thing when we say the Kedushin, the marriage of Yid and Eibishter, also, as is Muzayin Beit Inyon, you have to have both. Side that you're connected to him, side that you're disconnected from everybody, from all Taivas. It's an interesting expression. It's impossible. It's impossible that we should have our love to Hashem in our heart, which means we're given over to Hashem. And with the same time, we should also have the feeling of the loving the worldly things, the Taivas. You can't have both. In other words, you have to be connected to Eibush, and automatically you are not connected to anything else. So now we know the similarity between the marriage of Yidden with the Eibishter to the marriage of a woman down here with a man. This already will explain why the meaning is that you're Mekadesh with Kesed. That's how the Sikha started. That even you can Mekadesh with 3 ways, but the meaning is that Yidden use Kesed. And the Rebbe said, must be because Kesed represents the ruchnisdike meaning of what marriage is. Bichlal, the contents of marriage is hinted in the word Kesed. Why? Because when we talk about the deeper meaning of Kedushin, meaning the Yichud und Veikus von Yidden mit den Eibishten, Kedushin we said is in Ruchnis, meaning that our connection to the Eibishter is verbunden the Ike mit der Beginne von Kesed. Our connection to the Eibishter has to do with Kesed. What does the word Kesed mean? Now, Kesed means silver, obviously. Kesed means money. But there's another meaning of Kesed. The Loshen nichsev nichsafti. Nichsev nichsafti means I long. It means love. When you longing to something, you love something, you're waiting for it. So the word Kesed represents Ave. Yavede von Ave. That's what Kesed is. Loving. What's in Inyan of Ave? You love something, you want to connect to it. And it says, less it says in Zayar, there's no Avedas Hashem as great as the Aved of Ave. There are other ways to serve Hashem, to Yirit or other things, but the greatest one, the real one, is Ave. So therefore, since Kesed represents Ave, and the real meaning of marriage is the Ave we have today, Bishter, the Mele, down here, in the marriage of a man and a woman, we use Kesed. Because that represents what the Kesed really means in the Pnimi Sinyonim, the love that Yid has today. This will also explain the deeper meaning in the 2 svaras we had in the Gei Kesed Dushin, Kinyan or Dushin. Whether the cause, the start is the Kinyan of the money, and the Kedushin comes as a result of that, or the start off is the Kedushin and the Kinyan comes as a result of that. But they're both true because they're both Svaras and Teira, so they're both emes. In Pnimius, you can have both. How? What is the having both? How could you have both? One says you start with the Kinyan, the other one says you start with the Kedushin. So if you start with the Kinyan, you're not starting with the Kedushin. If you start with the Kedushin, you're not starting with the Kinyan. But in Ruchnius, you could have both. Meaning, Haknos HaKesef, the Ave is Merames, that the Yichud the Tekes from Aiden with Neibishten Kanal. We said before that this Kesef represents the fact that the Yid loves Hashem and is connected to Hashem and is dobok to Hashem. On Kedushin, the word Kedushin, Belosh Nafroshav Abdullah, the word Kedushin, the Gemara says, me separated. The Gemara says, when you say to a woman, Harayat Mukudeshesli, what it means is, you are Osur. You are separated from everybody else. You say Harayat Mukudeshes Li. So it sounds like you are Osur to me. If the word Kedushin means Isur, like Hegdesh is Osur. So Teitsei says, what it means is, Harayat Mukudeshes Bishvili. It's as if you're saying you're Bekudish, you're separated from everybody else, Li, because of me, because now you're mine. So you have 2 things here. You have the Kesef, which is the longing of a Yitad David Aved Eivishter. And then you have the concept of Kesef Gedushin. The word Gedushin means you're separated from everybody else. If the priest from the Nyon Elam, so Beruchnis, it means separate from Nyon Elam. So the word Kesef Gedushin means both things. side that you're the positive side that you're separated from everything in the world. And in them, and in this way, these two inyonim that you're connected to the Eibishter, that's the Kedushin, that's the Kesef. And the Kedushin is which you're separated from everybody else. You have these two ways. Which one starts? Welche von is the Ile and kommt früher? Which one is the cause and comes first? Das ist totally in the eighth Beseder Avedet, sie bederech on Mata Lamailo, or the Mamailo Lamata. You can have both ways. There are two ways. And it depends if you're doing it Mata Lamailo, Mamailo Lamata. Mata Lamailo means you're starting from the bottom up. Mamailo Lamata, you're holding, you go up. Which means like this. That there are two ways of serving Hashem, and the Rebbe will explain more the protis what it is. You could serve Hashem starting from the beginning. Beginning, you're down here and you're starting to get closer. That's one way. That's called Mimata Lamayla. But then you could have a person that goes the other way. What he does is he goes, let's use the word doesn't even wait to separate himself from the Almaza. For some reason, he decides that he jumps straight to the Miyuchat with the Eibishter. And there'll be a difference which one it starts. In the Raveda, Mimata Lamayla is if you go normally from lower to higher, is there Inyan Akdushin Frier? Inyan Akdushin, which means separated from the world, that comes first. So the way to get close to Hashem, the first thing is you got to get rid of your tivus of the world. And that will bring about, if you really get away from the world, it'll cause you to have this great desire to the Eibishter, which is the Kesef. So there's the Kinyan HaKesef, but it comes after the Kedushin. Kedushin, we said, means Osir, L'kula Alma, Osir, away from the world. So normally, Milmata L'mayla, there's a normal Seder. Seder is, first you get rid of Taivas, then you get closer to the Eibishter. Sur Meirah, und dennoch, like I said, stay away from evil and do good. So first you stay away from evil, get rid of the evil, then you do good. In the Aveda, Milmayla Lamata, Aveda is Beit Nofer. But if you go Milmayla Lamata, you jump to the higher person that's able to, for whatever reason, start up with a higher, goes the other way. In other words, first, you get close to the Eibishter. Here we think back. First comes the Kesef. You're Kenya the Kesef. What does Kenya the Kesef mean? You have a Seder of Ava to the Eibishter. That makes the second thing, the precious from Vel, that makes the Kedushin, which is separated from the world. So here we have two possible ways of a Yid serving the Eibishter. One way is that you start off with separating from the world, and then you get Ava to the Eibishter. And the other way is you go straight directly to the Ava to the Eibishter, and automatically, if you have Ava to the Eibishter, then as a result of that comes the separation, the Kedushin separation of the world. Now, the Rebbe is going to go more in Protim in Aveda. The chiluk between the Tzvei Efanim and Mata L'mayla and the Mayla L'mata, the difference between these two ways, whether you start from the below or you start from the top, is Mitzadem was in the Tzvei Sugi Aveda. There's two separate ways of Aveda. He explains how. That A from the Aleph is the Aveda Shapaseda Vadraga. The first way that you start from Mata L'mayla means a person goes with a normal Seder. But thus is the Aveda Shapitam Vadas. You do psychologically. You think about it, and the first thing you get rid of. That's the normal Seder. You go, it's a normal Seder, and it's good, it's not bad. It's a Seder that you serve Davisha with Seichel, with this, so you go with a normal Seder. It's Kedusha, but it's a Seder that you do with Tam Vadas, with Seichel. Und der Fahr kennen die Zukunft Avas Hashem, eider sich peidisch von Avas Vatayvas on Elam. So if a person does normal, he can never reach the love of Hashem if he doesn't separate himself from the world, because normally if you connect to the world, you cannot connect to Hashem. And you're doing everything out in normal Seder. So normal Seder is first you got to get separated from the world, you got to have the Kedushin, and then you kind of the Kesef, which is the Ava. That zweite Reif is the Aveda, was is not Alpi Seder Vadraga. The second way is when you serve Hashem, not in a normal Seder. The Aveda Shalamayla Matamadas, you do it beyond your logic. It's not what Seichel tells you. As nit cooking comes a maim in the matzav. It's a person that has, no matter what, in spite of his level, that he's still connected to Taivas Elam Hazeh. Giter zechibe bedveikes solokus. He gives himself over to them. Sometimes you come to a point you're still Taivas everything, but it's enough, and you jump into getting close to the Eibishter. Veikes solokus. But das kommt at Kabbalah sale. This cannot come from Seichel, because Seichel doesn't work. That comes from Kabbalah El Shalamayla Matamadat. That's if you have you give yourself over to the Eibishter. Sometimes you have this, you accept the yoke of Hashem, not because Al Piseichel, this is how it works. You go beyond. Und durch dem wird der Mufresh und Potter von Taivas to Nugim Hazet. Now, if you do that, it works the other way. First, you get close to the Eibishter, because you just went Chatchila Ribe, so to speak, and then you get disconnected from the Yonam of Elam Hazet. This could also be as we said before, that the two limudim in Nigla have to do with these two things, whether first the Kinyan, then the Kedushin, or first the Kedushin, then the Kinyan. Yeruchnis, the Rebbe is going to explain it. The limud for Kiyikach Ish Isha is in Parshas Kedushin, and the limud for Yotzavach Kinyan in Kosev was Retzach wegen Lama Ivriya. The difference between the two, if you learn from the pasuk Yikach, where is it talking about? It's a pasuk that talks about marriage, and from there we learn out Yekim Mekadosh B'Kesef. The other one is not talking about marriage. The other one talks about an Oma Ivriya, as we said before. And from the way the Oma Ivriya goes out from her master, we learn out that in order to go out from the father to get married to a man, you got to give kesef. So the first one is in the regular parsha. Kiyikach is from the parsha of Kedushin, which is normal. And the other one is from an Oma Ivriya. So he said like this: in parsha Kedushin, the inyan Kedushin in Seder Aved al Derech. Parsha Kedushin talks to you normal, getting married, how the order of marriage is, what the Seder of marriage is. So there, that goes normal, derech Seder. Tam v'das, the normal way Seder goes, that's Mamatva Lamayla. There is the Seder, Afriyer Dar Zechufta on the Kedushin. So there, if you go normally, first you have to have Kedushin, which we said before means Prisha from Yona Elo, separating from the world. And then no Kesef, and then you will get Kesef. You get love to the Eibishter. So in the Pasuk of Kedushin, this Yikach, so we said before that pasuk fits that Iker is first the separation from the world. Iker is Kedushin. That's what we said before in Nigla also. Shenken the meaning like Kedushin in Parsha Oma Ivriya, when we learn out Kedushin not in its real Parsha, in a different Parsha, Parsha of Oma Ivriya. What's an Oma Ivriya? She said like an Evet. It's a female, but she's an Evet. That's called Aveda Seva. We're talking here about the Aveda of an Evet today. What's an Evet? An Eved is not because he does things because he likes it and goes to the Seder. Kabbalah Sale, he has the yoke of his master, and that's it. So when we talk about Kedushin, the way it comes from the din of learned out from Amma Ivriya, in this Kedushin, which is connected to Eved, because it's written the parsha of Evet, there you could be close to Hashem before you even separate from the world. These are so much so that if you're so much given over to the Eibush beyond Seichel, then you become separated from the world. So here we see how the Nigla and the Chassidus fits. The Nigla, the two Inyonim, the why Kesef is the Iker because of Chassidus, because of Ava to the Eibush. And we have the two Inyonim, the Ava to the Eibush, and the separation from the world. And one represents Kedusha, one represents the Kinyan Kesef. And we see how the two psukim fit to which one belongs to which Seder, and they're both true. In Nigla, they can be both true, but the Chassidus, it could be two different Avedas. You have one person doing this Aveda, one doing this Aveda. The Eidia Shleim Adem says even more, Ube'emek Yeser, even deeper, Aderinyan Anal, Tashaychet Soma Ivriya Dafkin. This is that we said, that the union of first being close to the Eibush and then separating the world has to do because if you're an Eved, you have Kabbalah Sale, but we have all kinds of Eved. You have Eved Ivi, Eved Kanaini, and Oma Ivriya. And here it's in the Parsha of Oma Ivriya. So the Rebbe wants to show that this is connected to the union of Oma Ivriya al Chassidus. What is it? So the Rebbe explains like this. It's very fun Aveda now. I know the Chiluk Dargis in the matzah from the meeting was to the Aveda. The two things that we said before, which it starts whether it starts from being close to the Eibush and then you get rid of the Elam Hazah, or you get first rid of the Elam Hazah and then close, is connected to what level the person is in. It's a deeper pshat, another pshat here. If he's a person that when we say you have to get rid of the Taivas Elam Hazah, we mean Pasha Kipshute. He has real Taivas in Elam Hazah, and you got to get rid of it. That's part of the marriage with David. You get rid of it. Then is the Seder al Derech Harogel. Then the Seder is normal. You can't to the Hechere Dargis and Aveda, so Yichud of Tekes Vashem durch Ave. You can't reach the higher levels and being close to Hashem, which is through Ave. Seidem is free Mavatal Derah. Was more is it? Unless you first destroy the evil, the Taivas Elam Hazah. If we're talking about regular Taivas Elam Hazah, that's how it's supposed to start. You can't get close to Hashem if you're still involved in Taivas Elam Hazah. The male that frees on the Rinyan like Dushin. First, you have to have the Dushin, which represents precious. Like we said before, Dushin means it's osir. You can't go to other men by the women. That means that you can't have Taivas Elam Hazah. The Havdalah separation. And then no kesef. Then you could after you get rid of the evil, then you could have the kesef, which is the yichud of dveikes v'lakus, the connection to Hashem. Shal saber mishem porish from Taivas Elam Hazah. If the person, I'm not talking about the person, the person has Taivas of this world. And when we say you have to separate, Poshet means separate you from taivas of eating taif or taivas of all kinds of taivas that you have. But a person who's not in that level, he still has to separate from the world. As fordert sich von ihm a hechere Darge from Precious. By him, we also need he should separate himself from Elam Hazir. But it's not separating from regular taivas. So Peter sein von Teva Midesov, that means another Madrege. It says a person could serve Hashem. But if he serves Hashem because that's the Teva of his Midas, that's not good enough. He could have Avat Hashem and he serves Hashem, but as long as that's his natural Midah, then that's not real serving Hashem. You got to get rid of the Midas. There's a famous word that says that there's what's the chosed or whatever it says is Leshanais, two expressions. Teva Midaisov or Midaisav Ativim. Person has to change. Midaisav Ativ means you have to change your natural midas. Natural midas are not always good. You got to change it. The other way is not to change the natural midas. The nature of the midas means even if it's a good midah, but if it's done because it's your nature, it's no good. So we could be talking about a person who doesn't have taivas ilmaz. He still has to change, separate himself from what? From doing things because it's his teva. So didn't the Meibish nitli the medidas from saying teva. So he should serve Hashem not according to the limitations of his teva. Azaprishus, if you're talking about that level of separation, that you have to work on. That says in Chassidus, you have to have Meichen the godless, and you could come to a point of understanding that you can't do it because that's your nature. You got to do it because the Eibishter wants. These boniners, the Inki 11 of Lakus, you have to be when you contemplate the depth of your heart in a Lakus. But those fail, that causes as like Teva Midas on this Hapach werden from Zeir Teva that the nature of your Midas will be changed. Your Teva will be changed. And he quotes a lotion, Sheyachuka the Lakus beshinui mimhus shukose lechem teil mahaz ubitapuchas amidas. Hapachas amidas. That you have to change after you misbeinen. The Masedek says this, you have to be misbeinen in the Lakus, and then you change your midas. So when we're talking about such a person to change his taivas, it's a different level. So here, what comes first? So here, by the case of if you are really separate from separate from taivas anyway. So here, first you have Avat Hashem, because the taivas is already not there. Now we say after you have the Avat Hashem, now you have to go back and go to the higher level of getting rid of your taivas. So first comes the kinyan, the kesef, and then comes the kedushin, which is separating for your taivas in your level. The far length of the made from the kedusha kesef. That's why this inyan, how kedusha kesef works, that we learn out from Oma Yivriya, and we said before when you learn it out from Oma Yivriya, which target is Oma Yivriya? So, like you said before in Nigla, it's also in Chassidus, that when it talks about Oma Yivriya, it's mistaber the way he touched to is that the Gdushin Tzutzuchuv Dafke durch dem was yesh kesef, that you give the money. The kinyan comes first. The kinyan kesef comes first. So he says because by Oma Yivriya, we're talking Oma Yivriya represents a higher madrege where the kesef comes first. The yuchad with Davish comes first. The desire to Davish comes first, and then comes the going away from Taivas Mahaza. Because the Taivas El Mahaza we're talking here is not real Taivas. And that's hinted in Oma Yivriya. Why? Well, the darge of Oma Yivriya is Shina Emidis Mahus Mahus. It says in Chassidus that what's the level? In Ruchnias, there's a level of Evet Kanani, Evet Ivri, and Oma Yivriya. Oma Yivriya represents when a person changes his midas from one Mahus to another. Why is it connected to Oma Yivriya? What does an Oma do? She named Poshet Tetvua. An Oma Yivriya works in the kitchen. She takes simple grain, she makes food, matam, makes a tasty food. That means she changes things up. So Oma Yivriya represents when you have to change your midas. When a yes, as kol nefesh befrat hot sich alle darges, every person has all the madreges. He dort in the sinnes keich have übergeben sich in ganzen beabot wechsel lakus. So this higher madrege, which starts off with giving yourself over to lakus, and then comes the separation from taivas. Everybody is shaychus to it. Everybody has all the madreges. It's possible to reach that madrege. But if you reach that madrege that you've given over to Hashem, then after that, automatically you get rid of taivas elam hazeh. Not only that, get rid of the taivas elam hazeh. We're talking here about you got rid of it before. Now it makes you that you reach the level of changing the mahus of your teva midas, even the good midas, but to change the teva midas. And through that, the woman is nikness becomes koni to the husband, which is the yichud udveikus van mit neighborsten. Betachas hayichud. Yidden become dover to the Eibush. This is the highest madrege. You're dover to the Eibush. You have no shaykhs to anything of Elam Hazeh. But those are the linear from the Suyin. That's the Suyin. Till now we're talking about Kedushin. All the three ways is Kedushin. Kedushin makes her engaged. And then there's another level of Nesuyin. The time of the Gemara used to take a year in between. Nowadays it takes 5 minutes. Under the chuppah, we give the Kedushin and right away make the Nesuyin. But there are two different. Kedushin is like a level of connected to the Eibishter, but it's not the real yichud. It can be, even Begashmi is up the halacha, till you have the Nesuyin, you can't have any relations. So the real yichud comes only after Nesuyin. It says that the fact that we're considered the wife of the Eibishter now is like an arusa, like we're engaged. We're married to the Eibishter, but in the form of an because it's not so connected. Mashiach will come, then will become the Nesuyin, which will be the Kor of Mamish, and that will come during the Aveda from Eires and Zman, because we do the Eires, which is also, as we said before, connected to the Eibishter and disconnected from Welt, everything. When we do that, Zman, we will be the Nesuyin, the Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu.